Welcome back, MTN Giants Podcast. Night one of the NFL Draft in the books. The Giants came in with one pick. They leave with two players. Not the most shocking thing based on what we've heard the past couple days. The Giants would most likely stick at three, take the player they see as the best available. Ends up being Abdul Carter. That was no surprise. Then we sat there the next 2 hours or so probably, waiting for the trade alert, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on TV. I like to shut off my phone or just turn notifications off because I hate ruining it. But we see a trade. Texans trade down with the Giants. Giants move up 9 spots, get to pick 25. And we all know right then and there it's Shedeur Sanders or it's Jaxson Dart. I guess there was that 1% chance of Jalen Milroe, but we knew it was a quarterback. And based on the last couple days, we heard this from, I think it was Todd McShay. We heard it from different beat writers for the Giants. There was a lot of chatter that Brian Daboll's guy was Jaxson Dart from Ole Miss. There were also reports that Joe Schoen was a big Shedeur Sanders fan, so there could have been some disagreements going on in that building. But ultimately, based on what Pat Leonard said in Spaces around like 5 or 6 o'clock on Thursday here, he said something along the lines of Brian Daboll is a big Jaxson Dart guy, but not so much on Shedeur Sanders. But while Joe Schoen was a big Shedeur guy, he also happened to really like Jaxson Dart. So it seemed like Joe Schoen was more open to both prospects as compared to Brian Daboll, who really seemed to like Dart and maybe not so much on Shedeur. So I think they just came to the agreement, Jaxson Dart's our guy. And that really seemed to happen within the past 48 hours. I think Dart's name was a link to the Giants. I think it always made sense. I even had that tweet back on March 12th, which was 2 weeks before they signed Russell Wilson, where I said it feels like the plan now is Russell Wilson and trade up for Dart, and what do you know, that somehow happens. So I took a stab in the dark, but I do know this team pretty well, I would say, and that ends up happening. So look, I'm not mad about it. I think maybe the perception is that I'm pissed off about this. And sure, I was in my feelings and a bit disappointed the first 20, 30 minutes after the pick happened because I did want it to be Shedeur Sanders. I think we all know that I thought highly of him, and I'm still pretty surprised he went undrafted in the first round. But maybe for him going to a team like, I don't know, the Rams or the Steelers later in the draft, that might be the best thing for him, and having this reality check of like, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I thought. So this could end up being a great thing for him. But as for Jaxson Dart, yeah, this is not Daniel Jones 2.0. I know the connections want to be out there of like, oh, this is DJ 2019 all over again. I mean, first off, it's the 6th overall pick versus the 25th overall pick. It's not even close in terms of value for the pick. And we're also forgetting that the Giants came away with who some people say is the best player in this draft in Abdul Carter. And there's been drafts before, I think I heard this from, it might have been Daniel Jeremiah, but there's been drafts before where a team will double up and take a really high-end position player in a draft and then take a quarterback later in the first round. The two examples were 2003, Terrell Suggs was taken 10th overall by the Baltimore Ravens. They took Kyle Bowler at 19th overall in that same draft. Obviously, Bowler did not have the best career, flamed out, goes down as a bust, but Terrell Suggs, like Hall of Fame player. 2007, the Cleveland Browns get their Hall of Fame left tackle, Joe Thomas, at 3rd overall. They then draft Brady Quinn in the first round, 22nd overall. Brady Quinn, successful in college, not so much in the NFL. We know how that went. So could it be one of those situations? Yeah. But I think if Abdul Carter ends up having the type of impact that Terrell Suggs had specifically, or even like a Joe Thomas, I know it's not the same position, but if he has an impact like those two guys, we're not really going to give a shit that the Giants missed on Jaxson Dart. Yeah, it sucks, and if they miss on Dart, it's a bad look, and maybe that's it for this regime. Like, this regime with Daboll and Schoen, they're putting their jobs on the line here for Jaxson Dart. There's really no doubt about it. And yeah, there's still a scenario where this turns out where, look, I think Jaxson Dart starts next year, by the way, not to start the season, no, but I do think there will be a time when the Giants are 4-10, 3-11, like whatever. They'll probably have a bad record. It's a very tough schedule next year, as we know. I do think there will be a time in December where it'll kind of be like what happened with Michael Penix with the Falcons this past year. And maybe Russell Wilson's not even playing that bad, but we do know his contract is pretty heavily incentive-based, and we know NFL teams don't want to have to pay their players extra money for incentives. So if the Giants have this bad record, I think they're going to be sitting there in December thinking, all right, we can just keep playing Russ and pay him these incentives for no reason? He's 36 years old. We could play Jameis Winston. We know who he is. Or why don't we get a look at the guy we just traded up in the first round for? Like, that's going to be the move, I feel like. So unless the Giants are surprisingly competing for a playoff spot in December, I do think Jaxson Dart will get 3 to 5 starts next year. I would not be surprised at all. I don't know if he's NFL ready right off the bat, but I do think Jaxson Dart's not going to be one of those guys you throw out there and he's a complete mess like a Jalen Milroe right away. But as I was getting to, yes, this is not Daniel Jones. I do not view them as the same type of prospect at all. I get the connections, he's white and it's maybe an overdraft in some people's minds, and some people may think, yeah, it's typical Giants, Eli Manning stamp of approval, he's Caucasian once again. Like, yeah, there's definitely some boxes checked that the Giants tend to look for. But when I first watched Jaxson Dart back in late January, I was actually pretty impressed. And it's funny because maybe like a week or two after I watched Jaxson Dart, that's when a lot of the hype was coming up and people were like, are we overlooking this guy? Is he better than we think? And yeah, I thought he was pretty good from what I watched. So I don't want people getting the impression that I hate this pick. I don't hate the pick of Jaxson Dart. I give this regime credit for finally putting their balls on the table and saying this is our guy and we're going to get him. And maybe it doesn't work out. There's always that chance. First round quarterbacks, especially late ones, it's like 50-50 if they bust or not. You never know. But at the end of the day, I respect them for making this trade, and maybe they gave up a bit too much. I think one of the things you can blame the Giants for, and personally I wouldn't, because there's no guarantee that Jaxson Dart would have been there at 34 tomorrow, but I guess one thing you can criticize is why did they trade up? Because there still was Sanders and Dart on the board. Chances are at least one of them would have been available at 34 tomorrow. But if they really had Dart like that much higher than Sanders and they wanted to make that move, I don't blame them because it could end up working out perfectly. So I don't blame them at all. This is your guy. You take that shot. And this was the right move. I mean, I put out this tweet like 2 hours before the draft started. I was saying if it was me drafting tonight, I would just take Carter at 3 because I think the quarterback market with Shedeur Sanders, his over-under for getting picked was 21.5, which was right at the Steelers pick. So clearly he was not expected to go high. I thought you can really trade back and into the first round and get Sanders if you really wanted to, and that ends up being right as he's still available on entering day 2. So you do the right thing. You draft Carter 3rd overall. I was actually pretty concerned. Like for basically the entire day, I felt so confident that it was Abdul Carter, and then when Goodell got on the microphone and just started speaking, I just had these Daniel Jones PTSD flashbacks where I was expecting him to say Jaxson Dart for a second, but luckily it was Abdul Carter. They did the right thing. And then they trade back and get Dart. And once again, yes, maybe they gave up a little too much. I mean, for those not familiar, I'm sure you guys know what they gave up by now. The Giants gave up the 34th overall pick tomorrow, second pick of the second round, 99th overall, which I believe was their compensatory pick from Xavier McKinney's contract, and a 3rd round pick for next year, which, yes, it could be early 3rd round, most likely. So that could be something in like, the 60s or something like that. But as I was getting to, as I tend to get sidetracked a lot, when I first watched Jaxson Dart, I was actually pretty impressed. The ball placement was really impressive to me. He has a very smooth throwing motion. I do like that about him. His arm's actually not that bad. I would say it's an above average arm. I think people look at like arm strength and there's so many different reactions. Like some people will say that Jaxson Dart has a shitty arm. Some people will say it's an elite arm. I think it's above average. When you're comparing it to NFL players, I feel like I've watched enough Red Zone over the past decade in primetime games and Giant games to know what an elite NFL arm looks like, and I don't think Jaxson Dart is elite when it comes to arm talent, but he's pretty good. He can hit you 50 yards downfield. I mean, sometimes the accuracy is not perfect down there for him, and sometimes it's a bit underthrown, but it's still good enough. The velocity is good enough. He can throw on the run. They ran a ton of play action at Ole Miss last year. It was like 53% of his throws, which is pretty insane. But you think back to 2022 when the Giants had their playoff run, there was a lot of bootlegs and play action that year, so that is something they can implement. And I remember saying this about Daniel Jones on his draft night, so I'm kind of getting taken back to that 6 years ago. Whenever was it 6 years ago? Yeah, 6 years ago. I remember saying that Daniel Jones was a very underrated athlete, and I think Jaxson Dart fits the same thing here. Dart almost had 500 rushing yards on 124 attempts last year, and I know John Gruden called him out for this during their what is it called? QB Camp or something? The show that John Gruden does now for Barstool. I forget what it's called now. Gruden's QB Class. There we go. It was an hour episode on Barstool Sports. So if you didn't watch that, I actually watched it today. So I was like, all right, I'm all caught up on Jaxson Dart here. I know what needs to be known about Jaxson Dart. And then ironically, the Giants take him a few hours later. But as I was getting to, a thing about Jaxson Dart that Gruden called out, and they showed examples of this, is that the guy does not really know when to get down. He does take some unnecessary hits, stuff that you cannot have for a franchise quarterback, trying to run guys over with his right shoulder, which you do not want to do as a right-handed thrower, things like that. So like there's some things, like he's very competitive, Jaxson Dart, so I appreciate that. There's clips of him blowing up on the sidelines, and he definitely has passion. Like he has a lot more personality than the last few Giants quarterbacks, which I can get behind. I love a quarterback that shows heart and passion. That's why in 2018 I was such a big Baker Mayfield guy, like him grabbing his crotch and trash talking against Kansas that one game in his senior year or junior year, whatever the hell it was. I was like such a big fan of that. And I saw some clip, I forget who the guy is now, who did the was it Sal Paolantonio? Sal Paolantonio, yes, it was him. He did an interview, not an interview, but he was like at the Giants facility talking about this Jaxson Dart pick, and apparently one of the quotes was that Brian Dable saw a lot of Josh Allen and Jaxson Dart, and that like made me roll my eyes, because I personally do not see that at all. Like if anything, I think a fair comparison for a Jaxson Dart based on his size and kind of the way he plays, and I would say this is pre-injury, because this player I'm about to compare him to had a pretty devastating injury. It was actually against the Giants, and it did take away some of his mobility and willingness to run, but that's Dak Prescott, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I know people hear the name Dak Prescott and are like, oh, that guy sucks. But like, no, Dak Prescott's a solid quarterback. He's been top 10, top 15 for almost a decade now. Like the guy's a solid player. I don't think really Jaxson Dart reminds me of a Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen's an alien. Like if you're going to compare someone to Josh Allen, and yes, I know I love this guy in the draft process a couple years ago, but that's like Anthony Richardson. Like that's a guy who sucked accuracy-wise coming out of college, but he has this build where he's like 6'5" and just built and just a tank. I don't look at Jaxson Dart like that. Like Jaxson Dart's an above average athlete, above average runner, above average arm. Like I think he's a jack of all trades, master of none type of guy. But Brian Dable, if he is this quarterback guru that a lot of us want to label him as, sometimes I feel like he gets a little too much credit for Josh Allen, but his work with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, whoever, even like hell, winning games with Tommy DeVito, like that's very impressive. I know it's not something that we look back on fondly, especially me, because those wins might have cost us Drake May and Jaden Daniels, but to win games with that guy, I do not think that Tommy DeVito is a good quarterback at all. I do not think he belongs in the NFL. So to win games with that guy, it's like, all right, even like Tyrod Taylor that year. Tyrod Taylor gave us some of the best Giants pocket passing quarterback play that we saw in a very, very long time. So I have faith that Brian Dable can deliver with Jaxson Dart. How far does it get us? I don't know. Is it a Dak Prescott ceiling? Maybe. And while, yes, I preferred Shedeur Sanders, I don't think Jaxson Dart and Shedeur Sanders are that far off. I think Sanders is a bit more accurate. I think Sanders processes the game a bit better. And I do think Sanders has that it factor, that guy in the clutch. Like one thing about Jaxson Dart, and I said this last video I was not a fan of, some of his late game moments, like that overtime game against Florida, like he looked so bad, made 2 or 3 very interceptable throws that were luckily dropped for his statistics. But there were some late clutch throws from Jaxson Dart where you're like, why are you doing that? And I do think they addressed that in the John Gruden episode on Barstool. But it's funny how many different opinions, and this happens for almost every prospect, but it's just funny how many different opinions there are on Jaxson Dart. Like I saw on PFF, the comparison for him was Kenny Pickett. I don't get those vibes. I do think that Jaxson Dart's better than Kenny Pickett. Like I tried to talk myself into Kenny Pickett because that was the year the Giants had the top 2 picks in the top 7. They got, of course, Kayvon and Neal. So I was trying to talk myself into Kenny Pickett, but I couldn't even do it. I was like, yeah, this guy, I just don't see it. The small hands, the arm is not good. I just couldn't get behind it, and right now he's a backup. For Jaxson Dart, like, yeah, his size overall is a bit below average, but he's still a guy who's listed at 6'2", 225. His hand size is 9.5 inches. That's 39th percentile, so that's like not too bad. But the size is good enough. Like, we don't need a guy who's built like Josh Allen or Richardson. Like, yeah, it's nice to have those guys, but it's not a need. I prefer a guy who can play quarterback, and there's always concerns about guys that come from the Lane Kiffin offense. How does it translate to the NFL? I went over the Matt Barkley, the Matt Corral comparisons last video. Like, yeah, those are out there, of course, but I also don't hold it against him. Like, I think he did well in that offense for the most part. Like, sure, some things are very much catered to him. There was some RPO stuff that was easy. There's a lot of plays where they'll just snap the ball. If he has a one-on-one on the outside, he'll swing it out to the wide receiver. Easy completion, easy stats. But at the same time, he also had the highest yards per attempt last year, in the SEC at least. But the completion percentage, he led the SEC in that. He led in passing yards, yards per attempt, like yards per game. So the numbers are impressive, but you always have to wonder about the teammates he had and the offense he played in. So those things, of course, factor into it. I don't think looking at college stats is the best thing to do. But ultimately, yeah, it comes down to how much do you trust Brian Daboll. And once again, I said this last video as well, I am not thick-headed enough. Like, I have my own opinions. I do watch the players. I like to formulate my own opinions. There's no guarantee I'm right. And of course, there's no guarantee that Daboll and Shane are right. But I'm going to trust them way more than me because they get to interview the guys, which is very important. I guess Shedeur Sanders had some rough interviews, which maybe that would have turned me off as well. I get it. But I'm going to trust that Brian Daboll, who's been around quarterbacks his whole life, and Joe Shane's been around the NFL for 20 years, I'll trust that they know more than I do. Of course, there is some trust lost because of the whole Daniel Jones thing. I never wanted to extend that guy. They did. They wasted 2 years of our lives with him. But it's in the past, and I do believe in second chances, so I do think they have a shot to get their guy here. John Mara luckily gave them another chance, and they just have to make it work. I think if Jaxson Dart goes out there and starts 3 to 5 games next year, as I predicted, and he looks god-awful, that might be it. Like, you don't want to judge a guy off that many games, but how patient can John Mara be, you know? So, or maybe they would just keep Shane, fire Daboll. I don't know, but there's always a chance that could happen. It's also nice knowing that Dart's only 21. He'll be 22 in May, so that's coming up in about a month here, about 3 weeks till he turns 22. But I thought he was older. I thought he was like 23 already. So to find out he's only 21, like, that makes me feel better. I do feel like personality-wise, and I thought Shedeur was great for New York as well, but I think personality-wise, like, it's going to work out. I think Jaxson Dart has a good personality. He's not a robot like the past couple quarterbacks we've had. There's some personality there, but he does end up saying the right thing, so it's not like he's going to say some dumb shit or throw his offensive line under the bus like some people had a problem with Shedeur for that. So overall, yeah, I'm not, like, pissed off about the Jaxson Dart pick. I can totally get behind it. I'll be rooting for him. I don't have nearly the same reaction that I do for Daniel Jones. I know my microphone and stuff didn't sound as good back then, but if you go back and watch my 2019 round 1 reaction, it was not nearly as positive as this. Sure, I have my concerns about Dart, even like not playing under center. Like, that's another thing where I know the Giants aren't like huge on it, but still, it's something you have to do in the NFL. And once again, I think he's pretty good at almost everything, but just not elite or excellent at any particular trait. So, like, that's the thing about Dart, that it's tough to hang your hat on, like, that one ability that he's so good at. For Cam Ward, it was the anticipation, it was the different throwing angles. For Jalen Milroe, obviously the running ability. He could be the best running quarterback ever, people said. Shedeur Sanders, it's the plus accuracy, it's the late comebacks, it's the it factor. You look at Jaxson Dart and it's like, yeah, he's pretty good at everything, but what's his calling card? What's the thing about Jaxson Dart that's who he is? Like, I still don't know. Oh, and yeah, the Giants also took Abdul Carter, which we really have not covered yet, so my apologies. But, like, we talked about Carter a lot the last few videos here. I mean, Carter, elite explosiveness, just has a really good dip move, great bend, has that ghost move. I would like to see more pass rushing moves to the inside. Like, that's a concern I have, of course, because I feel like these offensive tackles in the NFL, like, they'll be privy to what he wants to do, and just that's to beat you outside and dip his shoulder. But some of the ways you can use Carter versatility wise, like, that's very impressive. They were even showing some, like, off-ball linebacker highlights tonight when they drafted him. There's just so much you can do with a player like that. Like, you can line him up in the A-gap. We saw that a few times at Penn State, and you can put him off ball, and he can cover guys. He can be a quarterback spy, and I can trust him to chase down pretty much any quarterback, maybe not named Lamar Jackson, but anybody else. And of course, he just has that crazy upside to be just an all-around great player. Of course, you want his calling card to be as a pass rusher. I think the explosiveness, the quickness, the bend, and even the motor he has, like the motor he has is crazy, and the guy does give you 100% every snap, which I appreciate. But of course, you have your downsides, like he doesn't have the longest arms. I feel like his power moves were not great. I feel like he maybe needs to develop some more pass rushing moves, but when you have an athlete like Carter, it'll be up to Brian Daboll, more specifically Shane Bowen, and of course, like the linebackers coach, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but it'll be up to those guys to get the most out of Abdul Carter. There is rawness to his game, obviously, but the ceiling is crazy high. We've seen the Von Miller comparisons. I don't love the Micah Parsons comparisons because I still remember watching Parsons at Penn State, and I just remember liking Parsons a lot more. But it's still a freaky ability with Abdul Carter. Like, guys that are that big should not be able to be that explosive and that twitchy and be able to change direction like that so quickly. So, like, there's a reason a guy like that goes top 3. Kind of the same reason that like Trayvon Walker went first overall. It was the Jaguars betting on traits. I'm not saying the Jaguars are the organization you want to take after, but I know people had the questions, and I still do, about why'd you take Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. And I think when you have a guy like Carter, he just had so many like just freak athletic things that you cannot teach that maybe Aiden Hutchinson didn't have. Hutchinson's stats were better. He projected to be a better player his rookie year than Trayvon Walker. And maybe Abdul Carter kind of has a similar career path. I hope not, because ultimately it took about maybe 2.5 years for Trayvon Walker to really start opening some eyes in a good way. So I don't want the development to take that long. But this is a guy, once again, who just made that late change to outside linebacker full time. You know, being an off-ball guy your first 2 years, and of course he made a bunch of plays there as well, but making that position change, like there's going to be stuff to learn, so I don't expect this guy to come in here right away, be a 14, 15 sack guy. It'd be nice, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but we've seen people say it 1,000 times, and I'm one of them, like the Giants may have the best defensive line in football. When you put those names together, even adding Chauncey Golston to that mix, like having Dex, having Abdul Carter, having Kayvon, who's not going anywhere, I don't see him getting traded. Brian Burns, of course, Chauncey Golston I just mentioned, and possibly someone on day 2 who they get at defensive tackle, which I think is still a position of need. The Giants can, you know, form this identity. And I know people, for some reason, like I know people really love to talk about drafting for positional need. And some people were like, we don't need an edge rusher. We don't need a pass rusher. Like, you can never have enough of those guys. It's not like, I know Brian Burns was good last year. He played hurt, and Kayvon is entering his 4th year now. And it's not like he's guaranteed to be here for the next 5 years. I do think they'll pick up his 5th year option, but beyond that, I don't know. But you don't pass on a guy like Carter just because, oh, there's too many mouths to feed, which I know is more of an offensive term, but you get the point. There will be enough snaps to go around, and I do think this ends up being the right pick. I think if they passed on Carter at 3, that would have been the wrong choice. I definitely preferred Travis Hunter more. I think he is the G word. I think he's generational. Of course, the Jaguars thought the same thing, and in their new regime, they made a big time move and traded up for him, which I'm still pretty shocked that happened, but they're calling their shot. And I think as long as Hunter stays healthy, and I mentioned this before, like Chase Young was supposed to be the guy, tears his ACL, was never the same guy, and yeah, there could have been work ethic concerns once again, but if Travis Hunter stays healthy, I do think the sky's the limit. Like, he can be just a game-changing player on both sides of the ball. Something you really don't see. I mean, not in my lifetime, at least. So I leave day 1 pretty satisfied. I know some people want to say, oh, the Giants won the draft. I don't know about all that yet. But I do leave the first day pretty satisfied. They did the right thing at 3. They did the smart thing. Don't take a quarterback. Don't reach for one at least, because we knew coming in that these quarterbacks were going to fall. It was Cam Ward, and then people were questioning if another quarterback would even go in the first round. Turns out one more did, but they did the right thing. They were able to wait. The Steelers were never really that serious about taking one. There was even that report about the Steelers possibly trading down, so I never really thought coming into today that the Steelers were going to take Shedeur Sanders or even Jaxson Dart. So they played it the right way. And yeah, the Texans got a good haul from the Giants to move back 9 spots. But ultimately, I think Jaxson Dart's good enough to win with. And if they get the most out of him and they just are able to develop his traits that he's pretty good at and make them elite, then yeah, the Giants might have a great quarterback on their hands, and I'll end up loving this pick. And I know I personally did not see the Josh Allen connection with Jaxson Dart, but if Brian Daboll thinks that, then once again, who am I? Just an idiot with a microphone. So I just hope he's right about that and they can get the most out of him. I know when I watched Dart play, I said to myself, yeah, this could work. This guy could start in the NFL. I see no reason why not. Don't know how high the ceiling is, which is always a big talking point with quarterbacks, and I'm guilty of that myself. Like, personally, yeah, I probably would have just rather have taken a shot on Milroe, not in the first round, but like I would have just waited till 34. But at least with Milroe, you know the traits are there where if he blows up, he really blows up and could be a top 5 quarterback. I don't know if Jaxson Dart ever gets there, but as I said before, like I know I kind of pulled out the Dak Prescott comparison out of my ass, but like the Dak Prescott thing, like I could see that happening where the guy is like the 8th to 12th best quarterback for the next decade once he starts playing. And yeah, you can possibly win with that if you get the right breaks, you have the right roster. Those things happen. I do want to check social media, Twitter, to make sure I'm not forgetting anything before I sign off here. Nothing really newsworthy that's worth mentioning, but there were a few things I meant to touch on with Jaxson Dart. I do like the ability of him being able to stick in the pocket and take a big hit and still deliver a throw. Like, he's not one of those guys who's going to shy away from the big hit. Some guys see that player barreling down at them and it throws off their accuracy, and sometimes they just tuck it and run or tuck it and take a sack. This guy, he knows he'll take a shot to the ribs and he'll still try to make that throw. So I do appreciate that about him. There's examples on tape of him going through progressions. There was this one, I forget who it's against now, but going through like 3 different reads and hitting this dig route 15 yards to the right, like that was good to see. So there's things like that where it's, you see those and you see like, all right, there's something there. I feel pretty good about it. And then there was that really cool throw. I know Anthony Rivardo tweeted this out today before the draft even happened, but it was a play where he had a guy chasing him down, an edge rusher chasing him down to the right. It looked like the play was going to result in a sack, fumble possibly, and he was just able to throw on the run going to his right. The running back turned upfield at the right time, and he threw like about a 15-yard pass, but just laid it out perfectly on the run. So he does some things on the run, as I said earlier, that are impressive. He's a better athlete than I think given credit for. And yeah, I think most people had good reactions to this. I do believe some had bad reactions. I mean, I know Robert Griffin III, if you want to take him seriously, he said the Giants have no idea what they're doing at quarterback. I mean, I think it makes sense what they did. You got 2 veterans in there, one starting in Russell Wilson to just make sure that you don't have to reach for a quarterback. And in their minds, they feel like they didn't reach for Jaxson Dart. They took him at the appropriate spot. And if the Giants had the 25th pick coming into tonight for some reason, and there was no trade up, I think people would look at this way differently. Like, oh, good value, Jaxson Dart, 25th overall. I know some people had him as like an early 2nd round guy. So whether it's 34 or 25, I'm not going to bitch about that one too much. Early 2nd round, late 1st round, almost the same shit, whatever. You get your 5th-year option on the rookie contract, which I failed to mention yet, so my bad. But that's also a big thing. And there's people I respect, like even Bobby Skinner put out his draft notes, his write-up on Jaxson Dart. He had him as a 4th-round guy. And I know Bobby watches his film, and I respect his opinion. So, yeah, I didn't see him as a 4th-round player, but I think 2nd-round player was a fair grade for Jaxson Dart. Like, once again, I think he's a good enough quarterback where he's good at enough things right now, and if you just give him a year to develop, then those things that he's good at can hopefully become great or just better, and you're left with a, I don't want to say Dak Prescott again, I've used that 3 times already. Lance Zierlein had Gardner Minshew as the NFL comp. I mean, I don't love that one. Bleacher Report had Carson Wentz with less arm strength. I guess. Wentz definitely had that longer, funky throwing motion, but I guess I can kind of see that. It's tough to find other comparisons, but yeah, if in the comments, if you have a good Jaxson Dart NFL comp, I would like to see it, so leave that in the comments. So as we sit here now, the Giants, of course, will not have the 34th pick. They will not have the 99th pick. So tomorrow, as far as we know, with no trades, I believe it's just the 65th pick, which is early third round. Pick 105 in round 4, 154 in round 5, pick from Seattle, 2 7th round picks. So there's still 5 picks or so left to be made. But that pick, round 3, number 65, that could be a starter. Even round 4, 105, a pretty early 4th round pick. Those guys can be starting level picks. I hope they find a way to get somebody on the defensive line. I would love Alfred Collins at that 65th pick. And we'll see if they attack running back or some position like that with that 104 pick. Anyway, that will do it. Leave in the comments your reaction to day 1 of the Giants draft. I am just happy it's behind us. I was tired of the speculation. I mean, I was a fan of the video I put together a couple days ago going over all the reports. I thought I did a good job on that one, but it's still so annoying to read all these different reports and different opinions and speculation. Just finally getting the answer. That feels good. So, once again, I wish it was Shedeur Sanders, but Jaxson Dart, there is still a lot to like there, so let's just hope that they got it right. Brian Dable, Joe Shane, putting their jobs on the line for this kid. I just hope it's the right choice. And we'll see if I do a podcast tomorrow. I'm thinking about it because I know I'm playing basketball tomorrow, so I probably can't watch the draft, but of course I'll see the pick. So maybe we'll see. That's iffy. If not, definitely on Saturday. Or if not that, definitely on Sunday. I can guarantee that one. But yeah, podcast or 2 in the next few days. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope you enjoyed day 1. Talk to you guys next time.